Welcome to the show tonight. We have got a great show for you. Um, just it's amazing who you can find, who you can see, and who's out there in the internet world that has so much information that you can share with us. So the bottom line is always remember what I tell you. It's your America. It doesn't belong to the government. It doesn't belong to the Senate. It doesn't belong to the Congress. It doesn't belong to any of the House. It doesn't belong to the politicians sitting in Washington, D.C. It belongs to you. It belongs to me. It belongs to America. And that's what they have to understand. They tend to forget that. But the reality is the Constitution says something totally different. And that is why I have Kirk Pendergrass here tonight, when he is from Kirks Law Corner. And he's going to tell us a little bit about he's going to tell us a lot about the Constitution. It's so many things that it's going to blow your mind. You think you know about the Constitution? You wait till you hear all this. I've had my conversation with him, and there's many things that he's accomplished and things he's done in Texas. Yeah, I'm sure he'll tell us about it. And he's got a mound of experience. And instead of me trying to tell you who he is, I'm going to introduce you to Kirk and let you know who he is, what he's about. Because I guarantee you, by the time this show is over, you'll know exactly what you need to know. We are America, and the Constitution belongs to us, we the people. So, Kirk, thank you for being on the show tonight. And before we get started, just tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself, and just put it out there. And I want you to run with the show, and you let us know what's going on and what we need to be doing as opposed to what we're doing. And so at this time, I'm going to turn the wheel over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for the introduction there, just a brief one. My name's Kirk Pendergrass, and I've been studying law and the history of law since 1995 out of necessity. And I've learned quite a few things about our history of law and how we got to where we are even today. Man, it's a rabbit hole if you've got the time. And I've spent a lot of time studying and researching. And, there's a lot of knowledge up here committed to memory. But there's still a lot out there to learn. So no man shall know it all, but I'm also a Marine Corps veteran, 4th Marine Tanker Division, Desert Storm, non-combat, but I was in during the time. So why is it's not showing? Anyways, so yeah, out of necessity and going through some of the things that I've been through, even as a kid, 1985, I was the child that was kidnapped by CPS of state of Washington. So that was my first foray into corruption in 1985. So I got to, a good taste of it as a 14-year-old, 13, 14 years old there.
Now, what was, do you want to explain what that was as far as, because the viewers and listeners may not know what that was?
So they call it CPS, is short for Child Protective Services. And so, what we see today is clear violations of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment. The violations of due process of law. They're coming in and seizing the children without lawful authority, without a warrant. They sometimes will have police officers or sheriff deputies with them to give, the appearance of some sort of lawful authority. And they'll come in and take your kids for whatever reason. And then statistically, we have 800,000 children a year that come up missing from state custody. So somebody want to explain to me where these children are going and what's going on with that? But that's just a tip of the iceberg here of the corruption that we're dealing with. And again, Constitution, right? That's the instrument of government that's supposed to serve the people, to protect the people, to defend the laws of nature, our rights, because our rights are actually the law. Like the Declaration of Independence reads, that to secure these rights from the laws of nature. life, liberty, pursuit of happiness is among those unalienable rights. And that's what government was supposed to be fundamentally and principally instituted for, even per the Law of Nations, written by Emery D. Vattel. Law of Nations, or the principles of the laws of nature, is applied to the conduct of nations. It's at the root of all law, international law. That's law of nations is international law. So Constitution is supposed to be the supreme written will of the people, and it is absolute and unalterable except for by and through the same method that it was created. Even though they have the Article 5 in there, that's you have to have the convention. They've altered that too, but now they say Congress can just make amendments however they want. That's part of Law of Nations, Book 1, Chapter 3, Section 34. The question was asked and answered whether or not the legislators have the authority to alter the fundamental law or the Constitution, and the answer is no, because they're the servants. How is it that the servants can alter the laws of their own creation? Fundamentally and principally, that's completely illogical. Right? I mean, wouldn't it be illogical?
Yeah, I mean, and I think people don't really, when we talk about the Constitution, people really don't delve into the deep, what the words mean. As we talked about, shall, so important, and all the words. Working at a sheriff's office, there are key words that, as a captain in civil, and you hear the word. All words are words until they're associated with the word shall or will. Those defining words that mean there are no other choices.
Yeah, shall is mandatory language. So anytime we read where it says shall, especially like Second Amendment, shall not be infringed, it's mandatory. There's no authority there for them to infringe on the right. And I'm not sure if you or your folks out there are aware of the recent case there, June of 2022, the Bruin case. It's a 125-page opinion there, because it seemed that everybody wanted to write their own part of the opinion. So essentially it boils down to that the right of self-defense comes from the laws of nature. And they cite Blackstone's commentaries on the law of England, right? So, it's one of the 6 primitive laws of nature, the right of self-defense. There's many different principles of the laws of nature here, these fundamental primitive laws of nature, like we're not supposed to be mutilating ourselves. It even talks about parental rights in there. That's one of the greatest powers of all existence, is the power of the parents over their children.
Exactly, and that's the big problem right now with all this indoctrination and everything that's going on, to basically brainwash the minds of the youth, to mold them in a manner such that's puts them on the opposite track of the Constitution in the first place.
Yep, and that's the thing, is that again, government is supposed to be instituted to secure these rights from being infringed, but it's like they're using the Declaration of Independence as a checklist of things to do instead of not to do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're doing everything that, contrary to what's been declared there, as the law, laying down the law here, because declarations lay down the law.
Now they use it, and on the left use it. They believe it's an ever-changing document that can be waved in the air and can be amended at any given time just because it feels good. Their Constitution isn't based on feelings; it's based on facts. It's based on experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Feelings have nothing to do with the Constitution.
Well, and if we really want to get serious about it, the Constitution doesn't even apply to the people. Not at all. Because Article 6, Clause 3, it's a contract of employment. Article 6, Clause 3 talks about all of the aforementioned senators, representatives, and members of the legislative branch, and all of the executive and judicial, both state and federal, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. They're the ones that are bound by it. The people are not bound by the Constitution. And again, to secure these rights, governments are instituted. So we have a whole body of law called the laws of nature. Sometimes people will refer to as the common law, because that is the law that is common to all mankind. And what did the people delegate in the Constitution? What are the powers that are delegated? Well, fundamentally and principally was one, to regulate commerce and to declare war. Essentially, that's about it. That is what government should be limited to, in a very tiny little box. And that's all this should be focused on. We're not supposed to have this great omnipresent government trying to dictate to the people what they can and can't do. That's a monarchy. We're not supposed to be a monarchy. We're supposed to be a republic. And in fact, we're supposed to have capitalism as our economy, and we're supposed to be a confederate republic. Some people like to refer to it as a constitutional republic, and that's not correct. It is a confederate republic. We are a union. A union is a league of friendship. A league of friendship is a confederacy. I mean, why is it called the Articles of Confederation? Why does it say we the people in order to form a more perfect union? That means we already had a perfect union. This just supposedly made it more perfect, because that was part of the deficiencies, was how to what? Call forth the militia to defend the nation, because that was part of the issue there, right? And revenue, regulating foreign commerce, foreign trade. And you can read about that in Federalist 45.
Mhm.
That's the key to understanding what government was instituted for and what powers it really has. And then we get into the word Constitution itself, because a lot of people will say, oh, well, government's mind control. They're absolutely correct, but they're misinterpreting what it means, because they don't know what the word Constitution is. Constitution is conscience. So that Constitution for government, or of the United States of America, that's supposed to be the mind, the conscience of the persons, what is created or enumerated in the Constitution itself. So president, right? You start with Article 1. You got how has this all come into being? Because we say it's the supreme law of the land, Article 6, Clause 2.
Mhm.
Law of the land literally means due process of law. Whoa, wait a minute. So if we fully comprehend what law of the land means, that Constitution mostly is nothing but a process to bring the president into being, the process to bring the legislative branch into being, all of the executive, all of the judicial. It's all right there. List how it's done, who votes for what, and the president nominates judges and the Senate appoints them. That's the process that is due. And when we fully comprehend what a constitution really is, we know that is to control the minds of the men who take an oath and are bound by it to discharge the duties of that office, the emoluments of that office, which is any advantage, profit, or gain received due to one's position of employment or holding of office. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 8.
That's a lot, and I wouldn't begin to know all those numbers and those things, but there's a lot of them out there. And I always think back, when you talk about England and the sheriffs and the kings and the Sheriff Reeves, that's how they got that name.
Mm-hmm.
And when they decided that they didn't want to abide by the king's rules, or they wanted to amend it to symbolize some, certain laws. I think from that standpoint, the king would want his taxes. That was his main goal. So the sheriff, or Sheriff Reeves, was his tax collector. And that was his sole purpose. And as we were talking not on the show, and you looked at how it was interesting of how the sheriff's position is a constitutional position. It's a constitutionally elected position, while police departments are the charters of what you educated last night when we were talking about of policies, i.e. the police, which is kind of interesting. You know, if I'd ever been taught that, I don't remember it. I'm getting a little bit older these days, so I don't remember quite as much anyway. But and I may have been, but
Right.
you know, and it makes sense. But the police departments, most people don't realize that the police are chartered. They're not constitutionally no constitutional authority. They're just not there for that. But the sheriff, you never saw that when the sheriff. You know, I always used to watch these shows, and whether the sheriff is White Earp or whoever, you never heard them say, "Let me call the police department, see if we can get some help." You know, that didn't exist, not in that manner. So as we became a different society, we began adding different things or mimicking other places to create um, our own way of life based on, I guess, what we felt was going to work or whoever decided it was going to work. And I always find that kind of interesting of how agencies out of the blue just jumped up and became a new government agency or a new state agency or, or a new police department that didn't exist before. And then it gets back to how land is annexed. The right to annex your land when you buy it, you pay taxes, and all of a sudden the city comes up and says, "Hey, we're going to take you in, and now you're going to pay more taxes." It's just kind of when you look at it, where does it address that in the Constitution? Where? So, and I always tell people, it's kind of like a driver's license. Most people think they have a right to drive in their state. They don't have a right because the state has the right to take it away from you because driving is a privilege, not a right, and is not addressed in any kind of constitution. There is no right to drive. Yet you have the freedom to drive if you're allowed the freedom to drive. If that makes sense. It's kind of
That's an oxymoron because the right of personal liberty is the right to the power of locomotion. See, we got to go back to the laws of nature, the body of law. So, yes, we do have the right of personal liberty. And you cannot convert a right into a privilege, license it, and attach a fee to it. That's Murdoch versus Pennsylvania.
But they do that all the time with the driver's license in every state.
Right. Except for me.
Yeah.
I don't have a driver's license, don't have plates on my car. And we're going round and around again about this. Except for they didn't file the traffic tickets this time because I already defeated this argument back in 2014. Okay. So again, it does not apply to the people. Man is to be free and independent of all things created by his fellow men without his own consent. Where's the oath of office to bind me to that? Mm-hmm. There isn't one.
Okay. So you've had the battles. You were saying about Texas. You want to enlighten the Texas issue? What was going on down there?
Well, this is part of Article the First, a Declaration of Rights here, the right to petition. It says right to petition government, but what we need to comprehend there is, there are petitions that are writs from the common law that go directly to the Supreme Court. But that's not particularly the right that they're referring to. It's the right to petition the legislature for the redress of grievances, the right to alter, reform, or abolish anything at any time we deem it necessary. Now, here we go again. Where does this right come from? It comes from the common law. Been around for a couple thousand years, since the Magna Carta. I guess it wouldn't be 2,000. But we're a little less than 1,000 years into the right of petition. And, if you got a grievance, we're supposed to, back in the day, they went to the king. Said, hey, this is going on over here, and can you fix this? Now, in our form of government that our founders created, all political power is inherent in the people. not the servants. So we're supposed to dictate to them what they're supposed to do. That's how that works. We're the masters, they're the servants. When you bind yourself to the Constitution, that's the contract of employment. You're bound by the terms and conditions of that contract, and you cannot exceed that or you're fired. And there's a process that is due. And again, this is part of why our founders wrote certain things in there based on the issues that they were having, such as the king coming in and wiping out the whole entire legislature, the council, and instituting his own people in there because those people were protecting the people's rights, and the king didn't want that. So he brings in these new people, and he's wiping out the entire legislature on a whim. So what did they say? Oh, no, you have to go through the impeachment process. We put this process in place to protect from being removed arbitrarily. That's just one instance. But so we're dealing with, corruption down there in Ector County, Texas. And this went to a petition to Congress in 2017. And my partner, Christopher Hallett, who's deceased now, he was murdered November 15th of 2020. Definitely I'm pretty sure it had something to do with.
Was he a law partner?
Yeah, he ended up creating e-clause out of this petition because the initial part of it was challenging the bar as a monopoly, and you cannot license the practice of law. There you go again. We have the right to the assistance of counsel. You cannot convert that right into a privilege, license it, and attach a fee to it. And we have a fundamental principle of our republic that no man or set of men are entitled to separate emoluments or privileges. And then, again, Article 1, Section 9(8), no titles of nobility. These members of the bar are British attorney or British accredited register. They are out of the International Bar Association from the Roman Catholic Church as the Crown Temple Bar. This is an ideology, an ideological conflict between the monarchy and our republic. They hold the title of nobility of Esquire. They don't belong here. And we have the original Article the 14th, or pardon me, Article the 13th. See, these are articles in addition to an amendment to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. That's a Declaration of Rights or Bill of Rights, laying down the law again. So this is part of how E-Clause got created. And one of the gentlemen's name in there is Nathan. I'll just go with Nathan for right now. Was part of it that was in there, and there was some issues with his son and the ex-wife and abuse, and he reported on that, and they basically took the evidence and turned around and used it against him, arrested him, threw him in jail, beat the crap out of him, almost killed him. So this is what got reported on, and basically this is a judicial corruption complaint based on Trump's executive order from, what was it, March 14th, 2017. It was a complete audit of the entire executive branch, but he put in there, for the next 6 months, people can report on any issues they think that we have within government. And so that's what Chris acted under. And essentially, in the end, the entire magistrate division of Ector County, Texas, family court there in Ector County, Texas, was abolished February of 2018. Now, what was discovered there? You can probably guess, but child trafficking. Okay, that's what's going on in a lot of these so-called family courts is nothing but child trafficking. And so that's part of the reason why it got abolished, along with the sheriff deputy there was the uncle, or I think it was an uncle or something. I think it was the uncle of the mother. And so they were using their positions of employment there as an advantage or office to do what they did, which is fraud. And so bulk transfer of over 1,250 cases to the district court, scheduled for dismissal December 20th, 2018. That's all by doing a petition, following due process of law to Congress. That's, in essence, that's actually pursuant to Article 4, Section 4, for that domestic violence, which is internal insurrection. See Luther versus Borden. This is about internal insurrection, an attempt to overthrow the Constitution and war against the people. And that's essentially what they're doing. So what does it say? On application of the legislature or the executive, if the legislature cannot be convened for domestic violence. There it is. There's the process that dictates that we go to the legislature.
So when you say domestic violence, what do most people think about when you hear the word domestic violence? I know, but I mean, you know.
Right. Most people think domestic violence is the Violence Against Women Act of 1995, which was found in part to be unconstitutional in 2000 and then reauthorized again in 2005. But the question is, does Congress have the authority to redefine what domestic violence is pursuant to Article 4, Section 4? The answer is no. And in fact, the actual actions taken by Congress in 1995, creating the Violence Against Women Act, is domestic violence. You know, they're weaponizing these family courts to use women and children as human shields to destroy the family. I mean, this goes back to Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals, is to destroy the family. You have to destroy the family unit so you can get everybody in disarray and, you know, especially like the men, to commit suicide. And now they're not even picking sides anymore. They're coming in and it doesn't matter. You got single mothers out there or single fathers out there, and they'll come in and take the kids anyway. Doesn't matter. They don't even pick a side anymore. But they'll still use this domestic violence protection order stuff, which recent case here, February 2nd, 2023, the Rahimi case. Here's a gentleman out there who's pretty wild with his arms, shooting them up in the air, shooting up a car. You know, this guy probably is a little bit of a danger to society, but he had a domestic violence protection order against him. And he's not supposed to have arms because Title 18, blah, 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 blah. They put plaster all over the front of this domestic violence protection order. It says you're supposed to turn in your arms and you're not allowed to have arms while you have this protection order. Well, the Fifth Circuit, because this particular case was actually put on hold and withdrawn, waiting and pending the outcome of the Rahimi case of June of 2022. And they declared it unconstitutional. Why? Because the right of self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We all have the right to have arms. It's not firearms. See, they play around with the word jurisdiction, and take jurisdiction where they have none. Now, see, here's how contract law works. There has to be a delegation of power. Where does it say anywhere in the First Amendment or Second Amendment, which is not amendments, they're actually articles?
Right.
Where does it say that Congress shall have the power to make legislation regarding this right? I don't see that delegation of power.
Yeah, definitely not specific, for sure.
And then we got that mandatory language in there, shall not. Just like the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law. They're not supposed to be making law. And I know people, Kirk, you're misinterpreting that. No, I'm not. People do not comprehend that our government does not make law. Okay? They make policy, regulations. That's it. It's not law. They try to say, it's statutory. No, get rid of law, because law is that which is laid down, ordained, or established. Declarations lay down the law. Constitutions are ordained and established. That's it. You make policy, and you are to regulate corporations, that which you create. Hale versus Hinkle. Okay, there's a clear distinction between an individual and a corporation. And the latter does not have the authority to refuse to open up its books and papers on suit of the state. But an individual does. We're in the private. We're not bound by the Constitution. It doesn't apply to us. And that's part of what the Fourth Amendment specifically states is the right of the people to be secure in their persons, papers, houses, and effects from unwarranted searches and seizures. Plain and simple.
So speaking of that, searches and seizures, with everything that's going on now with former President Trump, we talk about search and seizures and things of that nature, and what your knowledge of the Constitution is. What are your thoughts? How do they apply to everything that's going on with him right now?
This is an interesting thing here. For those that have been kind of following along and have a little bit of an idea of what's going on worldwide, a lot of stuff's being taken down, including the world child pedophilia ring stuff, the pharmaceutical industry, the money, International Monetary Fund, the Fed, Federal Reserve, the IRS. Not sure if how many people are aware that the Fed or Federal Reserve and the IRS was transferred over to the Department of Treasury by Trump. So that all got put where it belongs, which some people may not be aware that that's not actually legitimate government, was not part of our government. That's actually owned by somebody else. But we keep hearing, they're talking about this two-tier system. It's a double standard, right? Laws for thee and not for me. It's supposed to be the other way around. This is the stuff that's supposed to be for them, not for us. But we, the people, have been experiencing this for quite some time, this corruption, this two-tier system, how we get treated, but the public servants, get a slap on the wrist or it just goes away. So what's going on here is this getting down to a local level now. We're starting to investigate on a local level the corruption that's within America. And so here's a prime example, trying to wake people up out there about what's really going on here, is taking down what some people refer to as the deep state. We comprehend what the word state is, state of being, right? And we're in a state of being of a corrupt government, which is not actually a government, it's a corporation, which was actually foreclosed on and voluntary bankrupted by Trump in June of 2020. So this, we can go down a rabbit hole left and right at any point in time here, because there's just so much. But to get back to here on track, on point, is that what's going on is at a local level, what a lot of the people are being subjected to is this unlawful due process of law, this corrupt, false claims, false statements. Those of us out here that have been subjected to it know exactly what I'm talking about. Those that have never been subjected to the corrupt system may not even be aware of how corrupt it really is. You got people out there that get into a really good job. They got good pay. They have a nice house. They have all these nice cars. They have all these toys. They got their vacation, and they can, they're enjoying life, and they don't see any of this. And then some of it is this, well, just don't break the law. Well, that's the problem. That's not law. And the government doesn't have the authority to dictate to us, the people in the private, what we do, how we claim and exercise our rights. That's that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is among these unalienable rights from the laws of nature. So I think what's going on here is exposing to the people, waking people up about, okay, this Trump's being subjected to this. like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have been subjected to this process. And a lot of us, we don't even have the right of getting a grand jury indictment.
Mhm.
You know, so they skip right over that, even though the was it the fifth or sixth requires a grand jury in all capital offenses and infamous crimes. You gotta have a grand jury indictment. So it doesn't matter whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. You have to have a grand jury indictment. And they say, oh, well, if it's less than 6 months, a misdemeanor, then we don't have to. I don't see really where that says that.
How about the right to a speedy trial?
Right. 180 days, 6 months. Some points in time, it used to be 3 months. But they moved it to 6 months because of the way things were set up, how the judges had to travel around to the districts to hold court.
So what if Trump's attorney stood up and said, "We have a right to a speedy trial. Let's do it"? What would that do to the whole process?
Well, that's the trial part, but there's the pleadings part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the very beginning of a case, we're supposed to be doing our pleadings. How do you plead? You know,
Right.
Supposedly he was arraigned Tuesday, right?
For a crime that we don't know what it is.
Well, they were supposed to inform him. They were supposed to give him the charging document or complaint, right? Formal written complaint. You're somebody over here is complaining that you did this. Well, where's that man? That man's supposed to take the stand, supposed to be, testify under oath, reduced to writing, and subscribed. Supposed to be cross-examined. So there you go. Where's due process of law here?
So if you were, as an attorney, you were representing Donald Trump right now, what would be your target for all of this? What would be your best advice as an attorney representing the former president of the United States? What would you say to him or to the courts?
Instantly, motion to dismiss.
Based on?
Assert certain grounds. Oh, we could go with defects in the prior proceedings. We can go with tampering with the grand jury. Then the most obvious stuff is this is way out of a statute of limitations. Right. Most felonies are 5 years. But where's the primary? These are what they're talking about. There is secondary. Where's the primary? Where's the cause of action to begin with? And where's the man who's claiming his right to a cause of action, the accuser? Because, see, this goes back to prosecution by information. Well, we've been informed. No, where's the man who has standing to claim a right to a cause of action here? Because that's the man that needs to take the stand and testify under oath that he has firsthand knowledge of this evidence he's about to present to the court. And this whole ideology that the prosecutor is the one that goes to the grand jury, and no. See, procedural error. Grand jury's supposed to do the grand jury indictment, then it's supposed to go over to the judicial branch. Prosecutor and the judge, none of them are supposed to have anything to do with the grand jury. That has nothing to do with them. And in fact, we're going to tell the real truth. The common law grand jury is supposed to be at the common law, is supposed to be done by the people, not by public servants and not selected by the public servants. That's supposed to be done by the people.
Not by political hacks, in other words. We're not supposed to have, you're looking at a man and you're trying to find a crime as opposed to trying to find the man who committed a crime. You're looking at a man trying to create a crime. And it's the dangerous thing I've ever seen. And, to me, it always gets back to, now you're looking at Arkansas. Arkansas now is getting ready to open up a state investigation into the Clinton campaign's funding for their nonprofit organization, which we all know that was corrupt in the first place and allowed to exist. They made it clear, and I think a lot of those 33,000 emails had a lot to do with that foundation, those quid pro quos, and that's what they were more worried about anything, other than the fact that they were paying somebody to trail, track, and spy on another presidential campaign, which, it gets back to where you got a crime that they're alleging in 2016, but then the paperwork says the offense was committed in 2017.
Yeah.
So what, how do you do that? You
Right.
couldn't be a magic genie and pull that crap. That's like, and I'm sitting here thinking, if you read it, the crime was in 2016. However, you attempted to change the election in 2017 for the 2016 election. And then today you got this harlot on television saying, "Oh, I wish they would have me in there so I could testify to the grand jury about what's going on." And she's got that what do you call it, the non-disclosure agreement? Well, let me tell you something. Do you think the non-disclosure agreements are just something new? There are non-disclosure agreements for businesses. If you have a job and you're in a practice or you do something, you cannot get back involved in it, or you can't get involved in it within 100 miles of the business itself. So this isn't. Does that mean that that's illegal? But you can't talk about it though. You can't talk about it, but yet you get paid and you want to talk about it. And the only way you can really talk about it is if you get subpoenaed to come talk about it by law. But then again, it shows that Trump has won every appeal against her, to the point that she's right now $650,000 in debt on attorney and legal fees, and she keeps pushing it.
Oddly enough, he just got awarded what was it, $500,000 in attorney fees the same day.
Yeah, the same day that the
Tuesday
fake indictments come out.
Yeah,
and I say that I don't mind saying it because there was nothing there. There's no substance. We're indicting you for a crime, but we're not going to tell you what that crime is right now. But we're going to speculate. We'll release it to the New York Times, and you can read it there. It's the New York Speculation Times. Yeah, they could throw it out and put it out there. So it gets back, and I look at this, and I think, when you hear people, well, Trump can't win. This is a lot of, my thing out to anybody is this. When you're fighting, and they can call it the deep state, they call it whatever they want to call it. I'm going to say, it's the Illuminati, it's this, it's that. First of all, that Illuminati and all that nonsense, we got a deep state, and we've had a deep state since politics began. And who facilitated that? And where did our politicians get that from? From the first known politician, Machiavelli, or Machiavelli, or whoever you want, wherever you're from. But when you have somebody like that, and he tells us, he would tell the kings, if you suspect disloyalty, even if it's not something that you really believe, that you kind of think it could be, you need to cut the head off of that person that you think may be disloyal to you and may want to come and take your job or take your life one day, just on speculation.
Yep.
So, you got the New York Speculation Times. It's what they amount to. But they get all this information and nobody challenges them where to get the information from. But you get somebody else to get it, and they want to bring them in before a grand jury, subpoena. They want to bust up all executive orders. They want to call something an insurrection. Look, if you look up the terms of the word insurrection, there was no insurrection that day. It didn't fit the definition of what an insurrection is. And then I heard today in Tennessee how they were putting some people out of the legislature because they got up with the crowd and caused a lot of issues, and pretty violent crowd on gun rights, the anti-gun rights, and they put one of them out of the legislature now. The other one, they didn't. But they're voting on a third one now to see what they're going to do with that legislature. So, and they have a complete majority. They have a super majority there. So they must be looking at it, because if the super majority is go 100%, that second person would have never made it through that vote either. So something's happening there that I think they must be looking at the actual nonsense that went on. When you're out there, creating havoc, throwing bottles, and whatever they were doing, that's not an insurrection, but it is one hell of a disturbance. But they can call it what it is.
Well, see, this again, diction, proper words. So
Mm-hmm.
Insurrection is internal,
Mm-hmm.
and rebellion is external.
Yep.
So on that particular day over there, which a lot of people were not even supposed to talk about it, but
Mm-hmm.
the proof's in the pudding.
Mm-hmm.
Tucker Carlson's coming out with some of the video footage from inside the building.
Well, they released that one guy that was the sailor. Remember the one they held up as the perpetrator? He was the perp walk. Everybody did the perp walk with him, and they found out that he was invited into there and handed over the keys, pretty much.
Yeah, and then some of the video footage shows that this was pre-planned before anything went down to begin with.
Well, that's Pelosi and her gang.
Yeah,
that's what they wanted. That's why they didn't have enough security there. That's why they intentionally kept security away.
It was all a setup.
Well, and here's the people don't know is that the President of the United States cannot call the National Guard to the Capitol nor to Washington, D.C. That has to be Pelosi or the mayor, because he doesn't have that jurisdiction in that area. She has the Capitol. He can call it to other buildings, but he can't call the Capitol because it goes to the Speaker of the House. She's the one that can call it. But the National Guard, he tried to put 10,000 National Guard on standby. Mm-hmm. And that got kicked away. They didn't talk about that in any of this.
But see, that's that well-regulated militia being necessary for security of a free state, a state of being free, mm-hmm. free from those kinds of things. So technically speaking, as commander-in-chief, he does have every authority to bring the military in there.
Yeah, the military, but the National Guard.
But that's the militia.
They separated the two. See,
the military is the militia. It's just that's the organized, that well-regulated militia.
There you go.
Regulated. That's the organized state and federal.
Yeah, the two. That's the difference. Is one's organized, one's different. So here's my thing: is, but Pelosi, because they go with that rule of whatever name, it's not law, but a rule of theory or thought process. She still sat back, even though everybody believed that she could, and she sat back intentionally. And then when we started planting people out there in that crowd, the insight, look, it's nothing new. As a law enforcement officer, I have responded to many, many, many places and seen all kinds of stuff. And you do find certain people who pretend to be part of what they're not. Yeah. That one little bottle throw, one little smack up against the head, one little brick through a window can incite the entire place, and automatically blame goes out. And who can blame the best, hardest, and the fastest? Mm-hmm. And then who can wrap it up in a better package and present it? It was interesting to see and watch all this stuff. Just like when the Summer of Love was here. Remember that? Where the Antifa and through George Soros's fundraising arms, mm-hmm. had trucks delivering pallets of bricks. Yes. And just dropping them into towns in the middle of the night and saying nothing, just dropping the bricks out there. Mm-hmm. Because guess what? People just don't ride around their car with pallets of bricks on their trunk or in their back seat.
Are you sure, Rick?
I'm telling you, yeah. Isn't that amazing? I was like, come on. And then when they saw the trucks, the U-Haul trucks being rented, and they're doing all this, then they want to sit there and put a disclaimer on it. No, we wouldn't do that.
We actually had that right here downtown, Boise, the capital. We're in Idaho. We're a bunch of rednecks here, at least a lot of us, right? And we were anticipating some of this, and some people went down there and started patrolling the area, the unorganized militia, and discovered this pallet had just been dumped there full of bricks. And so what the boys do? Rolled up with their truck and started loading it up. We're getting this out of here. And then, the unorganized militia showed up downtown and made sure that there wasn't any issues. And the same thing with up north, the unorganized by government militia, which is, that's part of that right of the people to keep and bear arms.
Could you imagine if back then a businessman said, "Boy, all these free bricks, I can work toward a lot of foundations to build a lot of houses. Let me go get every one I can see." And what are they going to charge you with? Stealing weapons, stealing things. I mean, what are you going to charge? If anybody was smart enough or thought about it, and if I had a business, I'd go out there and get me a big rig for the pallets, and I'd have my little picking them up. I'd be around picking them up. I'd be going out with tens and tens of truckloads, and I'd go until I couldn't go anymore. I'd have enough to build my house and then some, for it.
Yeah. Thanks for helping me build my house.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. And I'd even put a plaque out there dedicated to Antifa, dedicated to all those who worked hard for me to build this. Thank you very much. And enough left to put out a monument to them. And that monument's going to be a broken window with a brick laying down in the front. That would be their monument, because it always gets me to people that complain the most about how dangerous things are the ones who go back up and get mad and tear up their own stuff. Look at the businesses they destroyed. That were businesses that were struggling, that were family members, that were their own communities. It made absolutely no sense, But what did we do about it? What are we doing about it now? We're waiting. We're waiting now, and we're going a totally different direction, and we're going to go after anybody who didn't believe that was okay. It stems all the way back to what you believe, not what you do. It goes back to it's not how you act. It's the thought police out there now from the government that worries about what you think. And if they can figure a way to put a law to create a law that changes the way you think, don't think they wouldn't do it. That's just the way it is. Yeah. That's government. It's always been there, all the way back from the King's days. The thought police.
This is what's been fought for, over and over and over and over again. And in my studies of the history, this is a repeat, right? It's just the same thing over and over again. And it really, honestly, goes back to the one world government, right? Full control, the deep state of being in control. And, we can go back to 1666 with the Sestake Trust Act. What was that all about? Oh, that was setting everything up to human traffic us all as chattel, as slavery. Now, a lot of people think of slavery or, human trafficking. We think of it as the sexual side of things. But there's part B, the debt slave, peonage. You're a peon, you're a slave, and you're a debt slave. Right in the code there, United States Code, Part B of human trafficking is debt slaves and peonage. So, we have Article 1, Section 9 and Article 1, Section 10, both state and federal, no bills of attainder. Now, some people will argue, oh, that had to do with, not getting a trial or, this kind of stuff and people getting executed. And no. That is any legislation that prescribes punishment. If it guarantees an award prior to, there you go. So we look at the penal code or the criminal code that says, if you do this, here's the amount of jail time, fine, or fine. There's your bill of attainder, bill of pains and penalties. Where's the alleged victim or accuser, the man who has standing to claim a right to a cause of action? Oh, well, the state's prosecuting you. Oh, where's the grand jury indictment? Oh, well, we're doing by information. No, this is exactly what our founders put in there in the Sixth Amendment. right? It has to be done by indictment. Well, what we're getting into now is the Roman civil law of the code, which is actually opposed to the law of nations, to the laws of nature, and the common law. And it's all enforced through bills of pains and penalties. I mean, how much more ideological conflict do we need to comprehend that that's the monarchy?
You know what the problem is, though? You know what the real problem is? We don't have enough regulation today. We don't have enough regulations today. We just need some more to fix this, right?
Right. Yeah. Let's make more regulations. Let's make more policy, because we need to make a law. How about we just all stop and look at this body of law over here, the laws of nature, that man is to be free. I mean, Article 1, Section 1 of my Idaho Constitution, Declaration of Right, it says rights of man. Man is to be free and equal. We have the right to acquire, possess, and utilize our property how we see fit. We have the right to defend ourselves and securing our own safety. Oh, wait a minute. Anything that comes in conflict with that would be void for any effect, because that's a fundamental principle of law. The right as the law, and rights impose a duty. So where a man has a right, another man owes him a duty to not trespass, because actually our rights, that's what that unalienable is because you're not able to place a lien upon them because they are our property. And property is an aggregate of guaranteed rights. So those guaranteed rights are God-given rights from the laws of nature. Naturally, fundamentally, and principally is supposed to be self-evident. We do not need to even write this stuff down. We're already supposed to know this stuff naturally. Common sense law here.
So now you're stretching. You're using the word from some of our politicians to be common sense. When I ran a campaign, my platform was real simple. My slogan was very simple, and it was called Common Sense Leadership. And that is something that you don't hear much about in it. Now, what I will say, and I'm, North Carolina now, we have a supermajority in the House and the Senate because we had one flip over today. And I understand there's one, maybe two, that may still flip to even increase the supermajority even more, because they're seeing the writing on the wall and they're getting away from a party that has no concept of the Constitution, has no concept of, I think, when you're going out there and you don't care about the Constitution. It doesn't apply to anything. And everything is open for discussion, and everything is potentially changeable. It's, like I said before, our documentation is not, our document is our documentation, and it is not an ever-changing document. You can't wake up one day and say, oh, well, I don't like Charmin, and I don't like Cottonwell and all that. I think I want to just change toilet paper. But the reality is that's what they want to do with the Constitution, because they associate the Constitution with that mindset that they could it don't even have to be interchangeable. We're just going to throw it away, and let's just start all over again.
Right.
And that's not what the Constitution is, because they don't have authority to throw it away and start all over again. The ones who gave it the authority are no longer here. They can't rescind what they did,
Well, it's supposed to be perpetual in the people, right? I think it was Benjamin Franklin. What have we wrought? A republic, if you can keep it, because all political power is inherent in the people.
Yeah,
all of it, not some of it, not most of it, but all of it.
And then Thomas Jefferson warned us about everything, about the caution to all this. It's and I tell what I'm talking about to the viewers tonight is that we always hear about the Constitution, but who really breaks it down to the bare minimal of it wasn't designed to be a confusing document either.
Right.
But it has become the most confusing document there is.
Mm-hmm.
And even to the people who want to change the Constitution, want to jump in and change the Bible too.
Yes.
So, so the principles and the values of which our country was established under, people, well, we didn't talk about God in the Constitution. Our forefathers spoke about God all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't have to include God in everything,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't exclude God in everything either. And now we got people that clearly don't want to include, but they want to exclude.
Yeah.
They want to take away. You're right.
Look at your state constitution. Okay. Yeah. Mine says, we the people of Idaho, grateful to Almighty God for the blessings of liberty.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Again, you got to comprehend or understand history here. What really was going on? Oh, part of like the Bruin case there, mm-hmm. On the Second Amendment was talking about the history. This is the part of the change that I'm seeing within the court systems, especially the Supreme Court. Their opinions, they're going back to the fundamental principles that our founders intended. And they even say this in the case, in both of the cases, the Rahimi case and the other one, Bruin case. But part of the keep part was because they were trying to tell the Christian Protestants that they couldn't keep their arms in their homes. So let's fully comprehend what it actually means when it says the right of the people to keep. It means we have the right to keep it wherever we want to keep it, whether it's concealed or open carry, what some people will call open carry because you can see it. And the right to bear. Now, are you ready for Are you sitting down, Rick?
Oh, wait, yeah. That's it.
Is to take up arms against the insurrectionists who are attempting to overthrow the Constitution and war against the people. Any tyrant, because that's our enemy. And it's declared in the Declaration of Independence who our enemies are and what their characteristics and conduct is. Mm-hmm. If you read the declared acts of tyranny, because that's what the Declaration of Independence really is, as it reads there, that we, the good people here, we have to declare the causes for the separation. That's really what the Declaration of Independence is declaring the causes for the separation. And part of the one that I was talking about earlier, dissolving the entire legislative houses. And
let me give a shout out.
Legislating force in all cases whatsoever, erecting a multitude of new offices, sending hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out our substance.
It's always, like I said, it's always interesting because I always this has been great because I always like to hear the perspective on what the Constitution, because you bring up a lot of valid points in here. And if you go by what the words actually say and don't try to define them in any other way, I always say what you mean what you say, and don't try to color code it. Don't try to skew it. It is what it is. I see Diesel D's says, "Hey, Kirk."
Yep.
So yeah, he's on there.
And one of my brothers out there.
Yeah. So hey, how you doing, Diesel? So the bottom line is, I know you got to go because we talked a little bit earlier that you had to be out. You got another appearance to be on another show. So, in closing, what would you want if out of anything that you would want to say to make people understand, at least try to educate themselves more about the Constitution? One is, where do they find you? How do they find you? And the other thing is, what do they do next? What is it they have to do and to make things more understandable, more amendable, for the Constitution in itself?
Yeah. I have kirkslawcorner.com. And just so everybody's aware that doesn't even know me at all, I actually have a business license, Kirks Law Corner LLC. I'm also an Idaho notary public, so I do have the oath and the rights and emoluments of the office of notary public as an officer of the state, which kind of technically speaking makes me a mandatory reporter. But kirkslawcorner.com. And my information is on there. Go to the links tab. It'll get you links to my Facebook page, my Rumble channel. I can't remember if I put my YouTube on there because because of YouTube's policies, easily get strikes over there. And my Telegram channels. There is a library tab. Now I have set up certain books in there in a chronological order, things for people to read. I mean, this is a shortcut, folks. Okay. I've done a lot of research, and this is the stuff that I found that is like super easy to read and comprehend. The treatise on arrest and false imprisonment. It will blow your mind. Even you probably, Rick. It blew part of my mind reading it. I'm like, whoa, you're not even supposed to put handcuffs on a man. The least amount of force necessary to make an arrest.
Well, and let me say
take him to jail. You're supposed to take him to the magistrate, to the justice of the peace.
Well, we actually train on the minimum force to make an arrest. Anyway, that's what you're supposed to do. You don't go for a home run body slam if all you got to do is basically to give them a handshake to arrest them or whatever. But the handcuffs is more or less from a law enforcement standpoint is for the safety of the officer, because you do get some pretty bad dudes out there. So,
well, the thing is you're not supposed to be securing your own safety. You're supposed to be securing our safety.
But to do that, you have to secure yours.
Stand there and do that. I mean, can I in the
but I didn't take the oath
on the battlefield. Yeah. Can I go and put handcuffs on the enemy because I'm trying to secure my own safety? I don't think they're going to go for that.
But if they're committing a crime, if they're in the process of a crime where you can be injured, hurt, or somebody else,
absolutely,
you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But let's get back to a humanitarian. Compassion for our fellow man and treating, because a man is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, right?
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, the sheriff would get the warrant from the judge, and what does it say? Bring him before me. Go search this particular place. So there should be some sort of a place there, not state of Idaho. That doesn't describe the place. It doesn't meet the minimum requirements of a warrant pursuant to the Fourth Amendment. It must particularly describe the place to be searched and the things or person to be seized. Yeah, but back in the day, the sheriff might show up and say, "Hey, Rick, I got a warrant for your arrest. The judge wants to see you." Okay, hop on your horse and I'll hop on my horse, or you hop in your car and I'll hop in my car, and I'll meet you down there. That's a civilized way to treat your fellow man. And even if he's not super honest, right? Now, if you're talking about a murderer, a rapist, somebody, and a real acts of violence, yeah, okay, that's a different scenario. But if we're talking about something that's not serious acts of violence, what's the need for an arrest? What's the need to secure the safety of anybody else?
It's funny you say that, because we used to train on them. If there were certain people you knew you were going to have to fight because that's who they were and they were dangerous. Mm-hmm. But there were so many arrests that I made by making a call to the house and saying, "Hey, look, you got this warrant. It's for a worthless check, whatever. Can you see me downtown? Oh yeah, what time can I meet you? Now you tell me what time can you be there?" And more people would turn themselves in, and that was because that's how it was done. If you went out there hardcore and you wanted to be hardcore when you didn't need to be, then a lot of times you yourself facilitate an issue that you brought on yourself because you didn't use your skills of communication to deal with it. I'd probably talk my way out of things or down people down from things on how my first contact was with them.
Yeah.
That the first 3 seconds to 5 seconds of a communication will dictate how this is going to play out.
Psychology,
Right.
fight or flight, you know.
Right.
But you come, hey, you know, I got a warrant for you. Judge wants to see you. Okay, yeah, I might even be guilty in the mind, right?
Right.
All right, let's go see the judge.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't happen, right? They take people to jail. They throw them in. They got to do their so-called booking process. You know, that's not due process of law. It's not the process that is due. It's not what the Fourth Amendment requires. It's not what the Fifth Amendment requires. So, and this is where, you know, I've learned to you know, first give it up to God and release some of this anger, because I was just think, well, you guys should know the law. Sure, yeah, you should. You really should. But the fact is we've all been taught wrong. We've all been lied to. So we got to have compassion for our fellow man in the situation where, you know, some folks have been empowered and have been taught to, this is how we do this. We arrest them, put handcuffs on them, throw them in the back of the car, take them down to jail, and they'll go see the judge whenever they get to see the judge. That's imprisoning a man that's innocent, and he hasn't been proven guilty yet. Not of his peers. He hasn't had a trial. That doesn't follow the law of the land, the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment. So what we're really struggling with right now is knowledge, because knowledge is power. And without knowledge, we have no power. So we need to get back to fundamental basics, which even Trump had put out that 1776 commission, and that's pretty much their report there is about education, and we need to bring back education and the truth, which is what I've been trying to do for 6 years, 7 years. I'm just trying to show people the letter of the law, what it says as it is written. It's not my opinion. I've showed cases like Boyd versus US that says, hey, you have to have a warrant. That warrant must be in your hand. It has to have a wet ink signature on it. And you must be tasked to go execute the warrant. It must state with particular, you know, these types of things is not my opinion. These are facts. So it's essentially what we need as a society as a whole is a complete re-education of society.
Because one of the things that you always hear a lot, and that the courtrooms like to bring up, and the prosecutors or anybody else, is what is the intent of the law and the spirit of the law, and those are the two dangest things. The arguments is what's the intent, what's the spirit.
That's right.
You know, so you know you're sitting there just shaking your head, going, okay, well, the intent of the law. Well, if you have to explain the intent of the law, then the law wasn't written the way it's supposed to have been written in the first place.
I love you, Rick, because that's exactly part of what was in the Bruin case and the Rahimi case. Was we have to go back to the intent of the founders, first of all, who wrote it, and then the intent of the legislature. And like it says here in my good Founders Bible, to further that is what is the evil it was intended to prevent. So what's the evil? If it's not inherently evil, how can it be made a crime?
Right. And I think it gets back to kind of give you a quick, I don't know if it's got, I've worked a cold case for years. And the information that I got out of that was by interviewing the suspect. And I could have cleared the case many years ago, but the problem was in it. I always look for what I call the triangle effect. Is I needed three points of contact to create the middle of the triangle, or whatever it is. That gives me some valid information. If I only had two, I worked like hell to get the third piece. And if I couldn't get the third piece, I put it back. I didn't throw it away. I put it in the back until I could kind of create this puzzle. So that and the politics of it, the case was in 1980. I took over the case after many, many investigators worked on it. And I took over the case in 90, pretty much 90, end of 92, early part of 93. And I worked that case, and I put more time, more hours, everything you can imagine about this case. It was a 13-year-old girl was abducted on her way home, and 3 months later, 2.5 months later, hunters found her body out in the woods in a local area where teenagers were known like a lover's lane area. So the significance of that is some pitiful, lonely dude who's never been to the lover's lane probably figured out a way to get there by murdering somebody. Now, I found out that that was the lover's lane, but nobody ever mentioned that previously, but our kids always knew what it was. So now I start tying this case a little bit better. So I know it's not an older person. It's probably going to be a younger person who's got some issues. And I have to start. So now I'm started working my way back. Anyway, long story short, I know who did it. I'm going to clear the case from a standpoint. And there'll be reasons that when I put out there what the deal is, it's going to answer a lot of questions. But because I didn't come out way back when, simply nobody was in jeopardy. Because this is the first time I'm going to say it, because the killer is deceased. The killer is no longer with us. And I interviewed the killer, and the things he said were the only things that the killer would know. And I got my information to track it back. So with have said that, everybody sits back and goes, this case will never be solved. Well, this case had a lot of things get involved in it. But when you look back at the laws were violated, it was clear that we knew, but he was never known as the killer because his name never came up until, I'd say, was it 13 years after the death. And I got the name. So I at least had something to focus on. And I found out there were some other potential victims that got away that never reported what occurred with them. So when you look at all these laws that are out there, I think sometimes if we focus on the laws of the real killers, the real evil folks, and spend more time dealing with those kinds of things, people have a way of working their ways out. I'm short of somebody being victimized.
Yeah.
Protect victims. But politics getting its way into recently, like the law has been with the politics, you're weaponizing politics. And I don't think our forefathers ever thought we're going to weaponize politics with this law. Now, I do think that the kings weaponized their politics.
Yes.
In many, many ways, as we talked before. When you have the headhunters, the Turkish, when they got out there and decided they wanted to be the king's headhunters, they would go out there and take the heads of the people who didn't pay tax and come back and leave them impaled on the king's gate. So he knew. They weren't going to walk up with the head and knock on the door and say, "Here you go." They would just go by with spiked gates, and they would just impale their heads on top of the gate. And then the king would come out there, or people would say, "Oh, so-and-so's has been beheaded," or whatever they called it at the time. So when you're talking about, that was the king's law. Yep. That was, and somehow we've gotten back and we're doing it politically, but we're doing it in a totally different manner. So every time you look up, they're trying to decapitate Trump and put his head for the king in the White House, or the king at the DOJ, or the king in New York, or the king in Arkansas Clinton group, or whoever,
Mm-hmm.
and they all want his head impaled on their gate.
Yep.
And they're going
Because
to do it.
these people are so freaking evil, and they're getting exposed,
Yeah.
and they're doing everything they can to keep from being found out.
Right. And we still have people that all this is going on, and they sit back and they go, oh, he was just a bad guy. He did this. No, he is the guy they're going after because he exposed the darkness. He
That's
brought
right.
the dark to light. He turned on the light switch. He brought in the sunshine by opening the curtains.
Absolutely.
He made the roaches scurry and hurry and run
Mm-hmm.
because the roaches had to run and hide. Now they took over. The lights are back off, so they're coming out with their devious bullcrap. And this is what it amounts to.
Yeah.
So they're spending all this time with BS. 6 years. So what are we going to do? What are we going to go
The
back?
FISA warrant and the Russia collusion.
What do they want? So what do I see? Here's what I see. It must have been 40 years ago. Somebody come up and said to Trump's dad and mom, the evildoer says, oh, 45 years from now, I want your firstborn, and I'm coming to get him no matter where he is. I'm going to take him to hell with me. That's what I see. That to me is more of a vision of what's going on with him, because they can't get over the fact that they hated him and he was a success. Mm-hmm. He was a major success in our country, and they can't stand it. And the liberals get out there, they whine, they cry, they boo, they do everything. I go on Facebook and I see these poor, pitiful liberals. They're trying to kind of celebrate things or whatever it is. And you can't talk to them because they always say, oh, I can't wait to see him in handcuffs. I can't wait to see him in the orange jumpsuit. I can't wait. But the reality is, when you look at them and you say, well, what the hell did you accomplish above and beyond what he's done? And one of them, I know for a fact, because when I was in law enforcement, this attorney wouldn't pay his child support for his children. Why? Because he was too busy being in law school. He was too busy not being able to pay it because he didn't have the money. So he was always absconding from child support, playing the system. And he better be glad and lucky that he had a family and a wife that let him get away with it, because it wasn't turned over to the courts. Because if it would turn over to the courts, he'd be on the other side of the problem. But the issue is, that's the people that you're looking at throwing the bricks through the windows. Those are people creating diversions to keep away from the truth. And all this with Trump is nothing but a giant diversion to keep him from the truth. And that's what it's at. And you know what? And we are lucky as hell to have somebody that's willing to stand there and take the shots, take the hits, get up and keep on fighting.
That's what I was going to say. I have to commend the man for standing up and doing what he's doing and putting his life on the line, his family's lives on the line. We're talking about a deep state of being corrupt that's been around for, clear back to 400 BC. Okay, this is old stuff. This isn't new corruption. And a lot of it has to do with their satanic rituals. This is a spiritual battle, essentially. And they're into their satanic rituals and their child pedophilia and, sacrificing and all that stuff that's been going on for a very long time. And that's actually, at the root of it, what they're trying to hide. So they have to control the money. They have to keep everybody, suppressed so nobody finds out.
Well, suppression, oppression, all of it. When you look at the border and you see how much fentanyl is coming across that border, and we have a government that's looking the other way. Mm-hmm. Think about it. They're looking the other way. They don't want to see it. Why? Because their investment is in fentanyl. Their investment is how it gets here. Don't think that the Chinese didn't ink some of these special business deals to get fentanyl. I think what you're going to find out when investigations are done, a lot of the inking deals is going to run back to trafficking of the children. And that's why they opened the pipeline and let the border wide open, because it was in the commitment of the deal. And why they let the drugs across the border, because they weren't going to purposely sell it. They weren't going to possess it. They were just going to let it enter. And then what happened after that was Katie barred the door. And we have a government that is failing to protect our country. And that is one of the things that our Constitution says. We are to be protected.
Mm-hmm.
This is a protected, but how do you get out there? Why wouldn't let's take a district attorney from another state. Failure to protect the citizens of Arkansas. Failure to protect the citizens of Texas. Why don't a district attorney that believes that's happened? That means he now, based on what went on in New York, can investigate the president and charge him with definitely malfeasance in office. If people do what they're supposed to do, okay, they're good to go. But it gets back to that intent. What was the real intent for opening our border? We're not going to talk about the spirit of the law because it didn't mean a daggum thing to them.
Mm-mm.
But what was the intent for opening the border? And the intent was to get richer at all costs. It did not matter. It does not matter. And the point is, like Diesel's, I'm looking at it, it's by design. That's the word I was thinking about a while ago.
About
It was
evil design.
but it was a plan. It was a left-wing plan to take down America to its knees. Because here's the thing: if you can't win the psyche of people, you put them in a position that they need or have to look for treatment. Get them addicted, make them do things they don't normally do, make them act in a way that they don't normally act, and you have now broke their spirit. And then you have a brainwashed society who will follow you into the bowels of hell every day.
Yep.
That's the fact. And that is what we have done to this country, because we are allowing fentanyl to come over and kill the children, to kill law enforcement, and you don't hear about it. And when you look up and you've got, if you look at the number, the volume of people dying from fentanyl every year, every day, you look at their age, and you know what? Heroin, every bit of this stuff, they're lacing it. They're now liquefying it. But people don't realize that fentanyl is an injection. Fentanyl is liquefied. Fentanyl can be laced into marijuana. It can be laced in any drug, and it doesn't take much. And just because you put out Narcan doesn't mean that you're going to save everybody in the world. And it's become so easy that we don't try to stop the drugs. We just try to save everybody who uses them. So we have to cut the poison off at the vine and quit messing with the infringement areas. You got to go deep, hard, strike fast, and do it with a vengeance. And until you do, you're going to be playing the make them rich game, because that's what's happening.
I was shocked when Trump was talking about going after the drug dealers and that kind of stuff. And then he said, and I'm referring to the pharmaceutical industry. I was thinking, cocaine and heroin coming across the border. And, this was in like 2017. He was either 17 or 18 that he was talking about that. I'm referring to the pharmaceutical. Well, see, pharmaceutical drugs versus natural medicine. Natural medicine comes from the earth. Drugs is pharmakia. It's alchemy. You're playing around with chemicals, and the whole pharmaceutical industry. See, they can't patent things from nature. So they take something from nature that does work as medicine, and then they create the synthetic so they can market their drug. They can patent their drug. So these are pharmaceutical drugs versus natural medicine. Even cocaine, technically speaking, comes from nature, comes from a coca plant. Peyote, cannabis, I mean, Coca-Cola.
Yeah, cocaine was in that one. The doctor did that.
But that was to get the people addicted
Yeah.
to come back and buy more of their product.
So marketing for it was a lot way back when. And again, people don't realize that the Chinese are making what's being used to create fentanyl. They are shipping everything that they need to make it to the cartels.
Yeah.
The cartels are making it and transport it. By the time it gets to the United States, that thing's been handled 4 and 5 different times from its inception. And then now the game they're playing is they're using TikTok. The Chinese are helping the cartels by providing TikTok to use our youth to offer jobs, transport vehicles. And what they're doing is they're transporting vehicles that were used to transport the illegals back to the location for the coyotes to pick up that car again and put more illegals in it and take it back. So they're paying school kids to do this, and then school kids are getting caught up in this, and they get caught up in the fentanyl, and because what they do is they addict them to that, and then they force them to drive the cars, and then they don't have to pay them anymore. And then when they don't, you start finding their bodies, and nobody knows why these young kids are dying. But nobody's talking about it. And I think it's interesting that in Florida, recently they have 3 children. I say 3 children, 17 and they're younger, and all of them are affiliated. All of them are affiliated to each other, but they were killed and dropped off somewhere else. Or 2 of them were shot. They were on a sports team together. The third one, he was shot and found not too far, but they all know each other. It's one of the things. So, was it somebody that got pissed off in the school? Was it? We don't know. Right. But with everything going on, it easily could be part of this trafficking. It could be, because think about it. They're trafficking and they're bringing. They're all bringing. In one trip, they got the children and the fentanyl. They're not just. It's a double dipping situation. Yeah. And we got a country who's too busy to act like they even care.
Right.
We got a government who's looking the other way, and I don't get it.
It's not in their face. It's not happening to them, so it's not happening.
Right. And look at the mental health of our country. They're not. It's easier to look away and pretend it don't exist than it is to try and deal with the situation. We're not trying. We're not doing that. And when Trump talked about mental health, everybody blew it off like it was nothing. Right. But fortunately for me, I've been talking about mental health all my life. And when I bring up in my campaign, when I ran mental health, that helped me turn some areas that deep blue red. Why? Because I was talking about an issue that affected people the most. We could fight everything we out there, but if you find out what the people are affected by the most, and right now, it's fentanyl. People are losing people every day in their families. And these are good people. These are unfortunate people who, by becoming addicted, for whatever reason, still were worth saving. And there are a lot of success stories out there, but there's a lot less success stories because our government is too busy looking the other way. And how do you kill a country? From inside.
Yep.
You poison it. You poison the person from inside, and that's what we got. And
that's that internal.
Yeah. So when people say the deep state's not real, deep state's been real forever. It's been real from the first time it existed. They used to call them spies. Then they turned them into a little bit of everything else. And if people went back and did their history and looked at Paul Revere and the Midnight Ride, they find out that Paul Revere didn't even finish the Midnight Ride. Most people don't know that. If you look at the true story of Paul Revere, he didn't even know how to ride a horse. Go back, John Adams. John Adams, he did copper. Yeah, he worked. He did a coppersmith or whatever you call him. But if you go back and look at the history, that midnight ride was so inflated. The one who actually did it, Paul Revere never finished a ride. You know, Paul, Paul Revere was stopped and taken into custody.
Oh, you know what? I think I remember that now.
And he blew his guts about what was going on. He told on everybody.
Yeah.
But the word still got out. It's just kind of like, we give the history, but we don't always give the history, in the way it is.
The totality of the truth.
Yeah, because what you want is a wonderful story that ends well. You want a happy ending. And it was a happy ending. It just wasn't a happy ending by the one they gave credit to. Just like John Adams' beer. What most people don't know about John Adams' beer, that's not his face on the beer. Check out and see whose real face is on the beer. John Adams was, and I learned this when I was up in Boston, walking through the process up there and learning. John Adams was one ugly dude, and they didn't want to put him on the beer. And the beer tastes like crap back then. Everybody made fun of it. So the history of it is great, because you're like, wow, all this history. But it goes to show it's the face, it's the market, it's you could put icing on a bowl and it looks like a really good tasty piece of cake until you put the knife in and find out it's a plastic bowl. And the reason I use that is because my birthday one year, people I worked with in the school system, the ladies in the cafeteria, made this cake, and they were so happy about this cake. And they wanted me to cut it. And when I went to cut it, it was a plastic bowl. Never had the cake. So I could use that, and I understand the concept. And that's why I use that. But it just, I can get a little, I don't yell and I don't scream, but I make my point is clear about things. I think we can discuss things anywhere and not feel that, nobody should feel that if you don't agree with them, take their knees out from under them. Difference is the left, if you don't agree with them, they want to burn your house down and kill your children.
Right.
Whereas if you're on the right side, you go, well, we have this conversation. Let's have the conversation. You won't get through a conversation without the left losing their marble, screaming, yelling, and wanting to flip the table upside down. That's just the nature of the beast. And so
that's part of how they've been brainwashed and indoctrinated. And anything that comes in conflict with what they were taught, they weren't taught critical thinking.
No.
Right. So they can't handle somebody bringing logic and reason to a conversation.
Right.
Because it's got to be this way according to how they were taught, or it shatters their entire world, and then they freak out.
And it's like, and I'm gonna get back to something else. It's like when one of the worst people I've ever had to deal with, and I don't, and it was over the issues of the Constitution, and he was a well-known, he was a sovereign citizen. He wasn't violent by no means. Boy, could he be loud. Boy, could he be noisy. I have no problem with that. But I'd have to go out and say, look, you can't be standing here and yelling and screaming at everybody, be peaceful and do what you got to do. Well, when I ran for office, he took it so personal. Every time I ran for office, he'd jump in, run as the, not the Libertarian. I was another candidate. He ran as Libertarian, which is his right to run. And he never really got a lot of votes. But he was going to make sure to get on that ballot because he took that so personal. And my theory of conversation always with him is, you might, if you're looking for confrontation, then you're just looking for confrontation. Can't nobody stop that. But if you're trying to make a point, make your point, let it be heard, put it in writing, and fight another day.
Absolutely.
That's the concept. But I couldn't get to and he was proud sovereign citizen. And then there's those extreme ones, like the guys that get out there on the roadway and they got stopped and didn't think they should be stopped, and they opened up fire and started shooting at the police in Arkansas, and people got killed and all that. And so, the father talked to son, and I just don't think you can agree to disagree, but invoking a violent situation never does any good for anybody, because somebody gonna get killed, because everybody's at that state of alarm. And I think so when the left screams about all the people on the extremes on the right, they need to look in the mirror and see what caused the fight back, because people criticized Trump because he was so hard. And I used to always remind them, but guess what? He got elected president that way. Why? Because he was telling the truth. And look, he knew when he was saying something that wasn't true. And why would he say it? Because he knew the left would lose their minds. He would do it because he would purposely say things that weren't true, knowing that he could control the entire media cycle for the next 72 hours. And that in itself was entertaining for me to watch people lose their mind. And he says, I have to sit there and think he's going, let me say this. Let's see who screams the loudest. Boom. Because, and then there's no doubt in my mind, he goes, oh yeah, I knew he'd jump up, and I knew he'd jump up. And I always thought he's sitting in the back laughing at everybody going through these little spin cycles, because if he got tired of hearing about something, he'd tweet something and change the entire. He was manipulating the media, and they weren't smart enough to understand they weren't controlling him. He was their puppet master, and he was really, really good at it. And people were like, well, you can't win. You can't. Well, he did win. He did win, and he won by that way. So it's, the whole thing.
They were freaking out because they didn't think that he would.
Yeah. Oh,
and
they would.
Numbers start rolling in, and their jaws are dropping, and just start crying. And
I loved it. I was sitting there watching the win, and early on it was like, well, and then all of a sudden the Clintons were in the back celebrating, hugging each other, and then all of a sudden it was like bloop, 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 and here it comes. But isn't it amazing that you knew that night who won the election? You knew who was going to win that election. You knew it. But yet when they had another election, it was set that nobody was going to know. Why? Because COVID kept everybody in, and we had to mail in ballots. Because nobody could validate a ballot back then. And I'm going to say it. My dad told me a long time ago, he was a union man. And he was a union man in the state of Pennsylvania and the state of Virginia. And he was telling me, he goes, it don't really mean anything. He says, I used to sit there and they would give us ballots. And it just came out. He was a Democrat, diehard Democrat. He would tell me, he said, we'd have 200-300 ballots that we would fill out. And just fill them on out, fill them on out, fill them out. He said, that was long before we had copy machines to do. He says, and we'd all had to fill them out, fill them out, fill them out. And then we'd hand them over. And everybody we were filling out, they were looking up. They were on the roll as dead people. Because the Democrats back in Pennsylvania, we used to be told, don't report their death to the Board of Elections. Because we're going to need that vote. That's the idea, the concept that the union was able to portray and keep the dead people on the rolls, because nobody was reporting their deaths. You're supposed to report their death to the county and the county down and all that.
Well, that's part of what the census is supposed to be about.
Right.
Which is why they suspended that for quite some time. Well,
because they're going to mail to you and they're going to ask you who you are and what you're about. They're not going to knock on your door anymore for the most part, because COVID has kept everybody in.
Yeah.
So they're not coming.
It's funny about that. What you're talking about there is this book here, Lex Parliamentary Americana. That's the law and practice of the legislative assemblies in the United States of America. It has an election petition in here, and it lays out the process. And the fact is, it talks about counterfeit ballots. Originally this was written back in 1856, and it has the history behind it from England into American common law. And this is the common law. It's like, it's not statutes, it's common law.
Well, when people ask me, they say, you think the election was rigged? Do I think the election was rigged? No, I think the votes were rigged. The
Well,
votes in Pennsylvania. Why do I say that? Because the man who used to do it on a regular basis, and they were paid to do it by the unions, and he was proud to do it by the unions. But the thing is, he didn't, even when he was doing that, he did not realize, my dad, who did not realize that the popular vote did not elect the president. He was filling out them ballots thinking he needed it for the popular vote. The reality, we all know that's not true because it goes to the elector. So in his mind, he was rocking it. He didn't realize he was only voting for Pennsylvania and only Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
He thought he was he was an American, proud to be. Reality, and when I tried to break it down, he wanted to argue. And finally, he saw Glenn, whatever his name is, on TV, and he talked about he liked them. Yeah, yes. He was watching Glenn Beck. He goes, I'd always like, but the guy's pretty smart. He's pretty smart. And then one day we were sitting there, and then Beck says, "Let me tell you how this works." And I watched him go from one look to another look. And he just said, "You mean to tell me that I was filling out those ballots and they didn't really mean anything for the win? And it was all about the state of Pennsylvania?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I thought you were effing with me." I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "I'm just trying to explain. You got mad at me."
Yeah.
And then he was PO'd, but he was still a union man, and he was going to be a union man and Democrat till the day he died, no matter how much they lied to him.
Yeah.
Because he liked the poison he knew, as opposed to what he said, the poison he didn't.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the, that's just the thing. And then you get these mail-in ballots to you. You fill this out and mail it in. I'm not mailing nothing in. I'm going in and I'm going to show my ID. "Well, sir, you don't need that." I said, "Yeah, I really do. If you don't type it, I'm still going to show it to you." "Well, you need to put that up. We don't need to see it." "Okay. I think you need to see it, and I'll put it back up. But that's who I am. I'm proud I'm voting. This is my name."
Right. Absolutely.
So I'm not,
that's the thing is like even reading some of the history of how this is actually supposed to work or worked, and I know it might be a little difficult to try and do it again,
right.
like how we did it back in the day, but everybody was supposed to show up, and then you would nominate, and then you would elect right there on the spot. You would count the ballots, and you would declare the winner. The sheriff would take the winner, go to the Secretary of State, and record the win.
Right. And we used to deliver ballots early morning to the precincts that were in envelopes. And I used to think, early voting, why are we taking ballots to the precincts? And why are all these ballots being transferred around? And in Durham, North Carolina, I don't care, on any election night, it always seems that there's a problem with voting in Durham, North Carolina, where they have to keep. Let me give you an example. So one of the elections came out, and they said, "Well, because of the heavy numbers showing up at the polls, we're going to have to leave the Durham polls open tonight. There's been a request made to the Superior Court judge, and he will make a decision shortly." Superior Court judge, Democrat, comes out, makes a decision. "Oh yeah, we'll leave the polls open for an extra hour and a half." I'm out there looking around, and my job as at the deputy at the time was to drive around. I mean, down the deputy, I was part of the rank structure, ride around and just keep it on polls. And what did I see? I didn't see any lines. I didn't see anything. Nothing was going on. That was, and next thing I know, I hear this. "Oh, they found 90,000 ballots in such and such." And it was after, you ready this? After the judge made the ruling that to keep the ballot, the voting open another hour and a half. So you tell me how there were no lines, but all votes had to be in by 7:30 to be counted that night. And we ended up keeping the polls open till 9 o'clock. And these boxes allegedly were found around
Mysteriously found.
8 o'clock that night. And guess how many votes it took to win? And when the vote was over, the governor, Republican governor, lost the race, Pat McCrory, to Cooper by something like, maybe I think it was 8,000 votes. But all night, McCrory had been up front and was kicking his butt until the judge got North Carolina, and it was on CNN. Durham, North Carolina, blah, 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 blah. So here we go again. Always Durham, North Carolina. Because I always tell anybody, Durham, North Carolina sets the standard for being crooked. That is the most. Chicago has nothing on Durham, North Carolina when it comes to voting. Nothing.
Yeah.
And they perfected it.
If counterfeit ballots and election fraud didn't exist, how are they talking about it, and why did they provide a process from the common law and write it in this book from 1856?
Because it existed, it just got perfected now.
Right.
Yeah, there's a difference between existing and perfecting it, and that makes the difference. It is what it is. But again, I know we kind of kept you past your time.
Yeah.
You might be able to make your meeting for a little bit.
Yeah.
Close. So let's. I want to say thank you for being here. It was a great conversation. People might listen to it. They may say, "Oh no," they may. But one thing about it, they've been given the information. I think everybody has the right to hear what everybody has to say, and you bring up a lot of valid points. It's the difference in the Constitution sometimes that we don't hear the opinions of other people, and it takes a lot of courage to stand up and say, "Hey, you guys aren't reading it right."
Yeah.
You know, because what they want, if you don't agree with somebody, what they want to do, and the reason I brought up sovereign citizen is because that's the first thing people want to say. Oh, they're a sovereign citizen. No, it's not. You can be a constitutionalist. Is that a problem with that? See, if you're a constitutionalist,
again, that's, the Ninth Amendment shall not be denied or disparaged just because these rights are not enumerated in this Bill of Rights here.
Right.
Madison in the debates, and this was part of the argument, was against the Bill of Rights, was there were so many rights to try to enumerate, it would be impossible to enumerate them all.
Right.
And if we did do a Bill of Rights, there would be those that may try to construe that those are the only rights that we have. So that was part of the debates on, and Madison said, well, let me see if I can write this up here. And it had different verbiage, and, it goes through changes and revisions until it gets to a final form. But the fact is sovereign citizen, constitutionalists, that is disparaging. That's a derogatory comment, and it's to give a negative connotation, right? And so let's clarify that. First of all, what's a citizen? Book 1, Chapter 19, subsection 212 of the Law of Nations defines what a citizen is. And that's that member of a civil society who is bound to perform certain duties and is subject to its authority. Wait a minute. Article 6, Clause 3 talks about members and being bound by the Constitution. And that's the contract, the duties to perform. So there's your citizens are the members of the legislative, executive, and judicial, both state and federal, whether elected or appointed in a position of public trust. We require people to be bound by oath or affirmation. So that makes them the citizen. And then section 213 is inhabitants. Oh, gee, Articles of Confederation talk about the inhabitants. Even our Ada County Sheriff's Manual talks about the inhabitants. I mean, this is current paperwork in 2023. How do we not comprehend inhabitants, people, and citizens? And the people and the inhabitants are in the private, and they're not subject to the statutes, the code, the ordinances. None of that applies to the people. It applies to corporations and those who are bound by it.
So if you think about what's bound and what this Constitution talks about, the word eminent domain is an ugly word for the Constitution, because it's nothing about taking your property is imminent, that you got other than taking it.
Yeah.
And even back in the day, you just couldn't go out and take somebody's land because you wanted to put a wagon trail through there. Because what would happen is you get shot at.
Yep.
You ain't gonna take it like that.
That's
but
right.
reality, it's a new world now. But every time somebody wants something, they want to claim eminent domain. We're
Yes.
bringing the state road through. And by the way, we're going to give you what we think is fair market value and live with it. Because
now, see,
oh well,
my Idaho Constitution specifically limits that eminent domain to public. That's right. We're not supposed to be taking private land. Can't claim that eminent domain over private because you don't have personal or subject matter jurisdiction over man in the private.
Right.
Only that which Hale versus Hinkle, and I found it in my own Idaho code. What does it say? Oh, that the public statutes apply to corporations. Point blank, that's exactly what it says per the Idaho code. I didn't write it.
And that's what it says federally, right?
Yeah.
Same thing.
This is fundamental.
Yeah.
Things like, hey, failure to identify. No. Public servants are required to have a valid ID to identify what official capacity they're acting in upon demand of the people.
Well, the Supreme Court
Not
even
the
said
other
that.
way around.
Well, the Supreme Court even said you don't have to have an ID to walk the street. You don't have to present an ID if somebody asks for it. If you've not committed a crime and they're not doing anything,
right?
And you can't create a crime or a possible crime because of it.
Okay, when you're a sheriff, you're issued a picture ID, are you not?
Yep.
All right. Okay. Same thing with my grandfather. He's retired, deceased now, but sheriff's department, sheriff's corner, retired. Always have his ID, his badge. Supposed to have a business card, and you're supposed to carry your oath of office with you. That's your three forms of identification, right?
Yep.
And so, how does a man who's not a sheriff or sheriff deputy, what kind of ID is he going to have?
Only, the state ID. That's about the.
But if he's not employed by the state, how does he get a state issued picture ID?
Right, to his driver's license.
But what if he's not a driver? What if he's not working for a corporation, operating a motor vehicle on the streets and highways, transporting goods or services while acting?
Well, I didn't say they all do it. I'm not going to say everybody does it. I'm going to say the government wants that. That's what they want you to do.
Right, that's what they want. But American Jurisprudence, Volume 16, Constitutional Law, Section 2, statutes are for government civil conduct. They apply to the public servants or corporations, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, Walmart.
So let me ask you this.
Apply to man in the private.
So what about man in the private kills his wife? Did a statute or do a law apply to that?
Okay, now you're talking the laws of nature. Thou shalt not commit murder. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. That's a body of law known as the common law.
You just did? You just put everybody in jail.
No, I just took everybody out of jail.
Think about it. If thou shalt not do this is kind of conclusive of not murder, which means that person, if they do murder, they're going. I'm saying that because so much crime now that we got out, that was a spinoff of what's going on in the crime, is if you think about it, if it was that easy, solving crime would be a heck of a lot easier. But it's been complicated by everything added in the middle to get to the imminent end.
Yeah.
So I see where you're going with it. And it makes for me, being in law enforcement, it makes a lot of sense, but it doesn't, because here's the deal. In that way, there's too many blocks in the middle to get to where the end's supposed to be. It shouldn't be that complicated.
It should be simple, common sense law, self-evident. And see, this is where we're at, is that it is an ideological conflict, the idea. So June 12th, 1776, the Virginia Declaration of Rights is a theoretical foundation of all government. It declares Christianity as our ideology of this nation called America. That is the document, not the Declaration of Independence. Then you have June 29th, 1776, as the Constitution. okay, that lays out the distinct three branches of government. But the thing is okay, now we have to comprehend that Christianity as an ideology is that God is the sovereign, and we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's sovereignty, and we become sovereign in our own right. Now, under Catholicism, the monarchy, Catholicism is the king, or the Pope is the sovereign,
Right.
and they come in under ecclesiastical law and canons and say, oh, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. And then we have the Roman civil law, the code, the Pandex, which is all, opposed to God being the sovereign. And it's the king is the sovereign. And we become, under the monarchy, subject to the king, like it says in the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's exactly what that's talking about, is converting us back into a monarchy in 1871 with the Reconstruction Acts, and 1878 bringing the American Bar Association in, creating that, and in 1881 the Code of Civil Procedure. They brought the Roman civil law back in, and all of this is all just code, which is the Roman civil law, which is all enforced through bills of pains and penalties, bills of attainder, bills of pains and penalties. This is exactly what our founders were talking about and what they were fighting against, even the English Bill of Rights of 1689, clear back to the War of 1812, trying to kick the bar out of here, the Esquires. Okay, that was part of what the War of 1812 was about, ratifying the original Article the 13th. Back to the Magna Carta. And in between there's plenty of sane things going on as this executive power.
Right.
I challenge people, go out there and read the English Bill of Rights of 1689 and tell me that it's not almost exactly what's going on again today. Read the Declaration of Independence in its entirety and fully comprehend what those declared acts of tyranny are and apply it to today.
Talk about reading. I've got one in the book I've read before, reading through it, and it's actually called "In Our Defense: The Bill of Rights in Action." And I was at the courthouse one day, and I was talking to a judge and in general conversation, and he said, a good read that you need to understand about in our defense, the Constitution. He said, we the people take time to read this book. He said, it's like the Bible for the Constitution. He said, and that's where he says, when I apply law, this is the only thing I look at. He says, I look at the Constitution. He says, when I apply law, he said,
this is what we need to be looking at, the Bible. And maxims of law. That's your rule of law. Mm-hmm. So, for example, a couple maxims of law here. Mm-hmm. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. We can't claim that we don't know. And then the second one that's kind of part of that is to know a thing and to be bound to know it are regarded in law as equivalent. Okay, Article 6, Clause 3. We're already, those of us that are bound by it, we're already deemed to know it.
Right.
In the Marine Corps, what's the oath? To uphold and defend this nation from foreign and domestic enemies. Mm-hmm. And, we talk about this doctrine of a lesser magistrate. There it is. In the Marine Corps, we are taught, okay, if your commanding officer gives you an order that's in direct violation of the Constitution, you are to disobey that direct order and report to the next higher in command. Mm-hmm. Right? We're already supposed to know that. Because it's a duty, right, to do that. So,
and that's because we get that drilled into our head.
Absolutely.
We first get in the military because it comes under anything you talk about. When we talked before, it's the code of military justice. Anything that you don't apply, they have the code, and that code can always lead to military justice, no matter what that justice is.
Yep. And then here's another one. What I cannot do in my person, I cannot do through the agency of another. Okay. So for police officers, sheriff deputies, whatever, you're the agents. Mm-hmm. You have to have a principle to act on behalf of. You're not supposed to be acting on your own.
Right.
What's the name of the man that you're coming to aid in defense of? Right? Where's the act of violence, which is called breaches of the peace, not disturbing the peace, but breaches of the peace is assaults and batteries. Assault is verbal, threats of violence. I'm going to cause physical harm to you. Okay, stop that, knock it off. Now, battery is when you put your hands on them.
Right.
Now, like it says in the Treatise on Arrest and False Imprisonment, it cites many case law in there. Okay, the arrest is a deprivation of liberty. Any deprivation of liberty constitutes an arrest. Hey, you, stop. Do you got some ID? That is an arrest. Now, what's the lawful authority to make the arrest? Where's it at? What's the felony? Or do you have a warrant? If you don't have a warrant, Boyd versus U.S., Fourth Amendment, you have no lawful authority to stop that man because he's exercising his right of liberty, personal liberty, pursuit of happiness, doing whatever, so as long as there's nothing going on. But now you got a situation where two guys are arguing, or a man and a woman, whatever. Now you can intervene, and it only goes so far as stopping the breach of the peace. And it gives a couple different examples there in Treatise on Arrest and False Imprisonment. And unfortunately, one of my favorite ones, I wouldn't say favorite ones, but one of the ones I like to use in there is the Pinkerton case, where it was a streetwalker, okay, supposedly known as a streetwalker. You know what I'm talking about, a streetwalker, right? On the corner and kind of stuff. Okay, you got the officer comes up there and suspects, blah, 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 blah. And she says, well, go ahead and arrest me. Well, goes to court and said, no, had no lawful authority to arrest her. She's in the private, has nothing to do with you. Even if there's a city ordinance that says so, doesn't matter. Does not apply. That's not the law. The law is we're to be free and equal and independent and enjoying our own life, right? Right of conscience. That's what religion is. Liberty of conscience. Liberty of conscience. The right to think for ourselves and do whatever we please so long as we do not cause harm to our fellow man. Trespass upon any of their rights. Because if not, there's no cause of action, that probable cause.
And probable cause, you and I discussed off camera was, well, probable cause, all you need probable cause. What is probable cause? Well, after looking at the thing, he probably did it. Yeah. And that is the standard that can be used to get a warrant.
But that is a standard. What the intent of our founders,
right,
and the common law through history means.
I.e., intent or spirit of the law is the difference. So if I say, he probably did it, I'm going to take him down. Well, why did he probably did it? Well, because he's standing there with the gun in his hand and there's still smoke going from it. You got a case. If he's, because we heard the shot and we saw him in the area, but he was nowhere near the body. Well,
no, that's actually good stuff right there. That's
think about you got
acts of violence,
right? And you got reasonable suspicion in the first place. That's going to take you to probable cause. So you always have to have the reasonable suspicion to get to probable cause. You can't go from probable cause. I always used to say it's kind of like you're driving down a road, you get stopped in your vehicle, you have ammunition sitting in the front seat. Does that give the officer probable cause to pull you out and search your car? It may give you reasonable suspicion, but it doesn't give you probable cause.
What's the crime?
Exactly.
You have to articulate the crime you suspect first,
right,
and place them under arrest.
Yeah, or what the special word in law enforcement is investigative detention, as the Supreme Court says. You can hold somebody in investigative detention as long as it's apparent that it's more likely that that person is involved in something. But the minute you determine that they are not, you must release them. You can't sit there and keep waiting for the charge to grow. It's That's like, right. Okay, you go. Frisk, Terry Frisk laws, and then Ohio and all that.
Terry search.
Yeah, Terry search. So and then You have the Carroll doctrine, where you got cars on a roadway, you can stop, you can search them under the Carroll doctrine. However, if it's sitting on somebody's private property, you can't go anywhere near it to look at that. You can look at it from your binoculars, and unless it's something serious crime, you see something, you want to take a look, you got to go articulate to the magistrate why you need a search warrant. You can't say, well, I happen to see this.
Yeah.
Happen to see doesn't mean anything,
Well, technically speaking, peering, using any kind of aid or assistance to your extend your vision, is a trespass.
Right. And the thing is you can
Because
you can
that's
gather
not
intel
directly in front of you.
Right. You can gather intel. You can gather all the intel in the world. The question is, do and how you act on it is the difference.
Yeah. Where's the actions that you have firsthand knowledge of?
Just like I was telling
That's
you.
That probable cause. Probably have a cause of action coming to the aid and defense, or even a preventive, right?
Yeah, you got to have it. I mean, you can't. And if you don't like something or something somebody's doing, you can't go out there and go, well, you know what? I'm going to just stretch it this way because I think I can articulate why I did it. I've never been one that says, my thing is either I had it or I didn't have it. I'm not going to go to court and try to fight for something I don't have.
Yeah.
Because credibility is everything to your case. And when you sit before the court or you could take a case, the last thing you want is to have lost your credibility because you were willing to fudge something that wasn't there.
Yeah.
I lost very few cases, but the cases I lost were because I clearly told the truth,
Right. I know that I try to apply the law equally to all, right? And so this is where I draw the conundrum, because when I start turning things around and we switch roles, okay? You got the alleged man walking down the street with a open carry, may even be concealed, or a rifle. And all of a sudden it's, hey, what are you doing? I got a call that says there's a man walking around with a rifle, or, so, okay, let's turn it around. Sheriff deputy, police officer walking down the street. Okay, do we get to go up and do a Terry search? Do we get to disarm them? Do we start demanding ID from them and to make sure that they're who they, purport that they are? That would be an equal application of the so-called law. The next question is, does the judicial branch have the power to make law?
I think they do.
Show me. Point to that emolument and grunt. Where's that at in the Constitution where that power is delegated to the judicial branch to make law?
No, they're not. And that's the thing, is when you're looking at executive branch, judicial branch, every branch has its own pecking order of what they're supposed to do. And you're not supposed to cross into the other one, i.e., they're supposed to be similar but independent of each other.
Separation of powers doctrine.
That's right.
So the legislature is supposed to create. The executive branch is to execute, not make, execute. And the judicial branch is supposed to enforce.
Right.
Or support, uphold, grant relief upon demands made. That's it. That's our three branches of government.
Well, that's it.
That's it.
Well, look, I tell you what, I appreciate you being on the show tonight, because it's been quite interesting, and I know it would be based on our earlier conversations, because the things that you were talking about are things that government has already taught us when we go through our basic law enforcement training. So when I started talking to you about certain things and you started laughing, I knew exactly you knew where I was going, because we were having a similar conversation. Because a lot of things of what you were saying has actually been taught in our BLET schools about the separations and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's being taught now, because we got so many woke agencies through their woke leadership. But I do know that law enforcement is not really happy right now about some of their leaders, and they can't wait for the day that they either leave that job to go somewhere else, or that leader no longer exists in that agency. They're under the auspices of a fraudulent leadership, because and I can't say, and I'm gonna say this: sheriffs whether they're Democrat or Republican, it's probably the only entity, for the most part, that with being in the law enforcement side of it, they may be belong to a party, but for the most time, their decisions are based on the law that's before them, and they can't differentiate from that.
Mm-hmm.
They can create a policy that creates roadblocks, which we have several across the country doing now. And I think in the long run, some of them are going to stay right where they're at because that's the environment of which they've always participated in and taken on. And then some, I think, will revert back to career, just enforcing law. But the sheriffs are less likely to create a law and less likely to jump out and enforce the law, because mostly the sheriffs tend to be, not all, very community service minded oriented, to where they're not looking to create a Supreme Court case.
Yeah.
That's
I know some of the things that I've said here tonight with you might be a little controversial for some people, but we seriously need to sit down and have this talk with our law enforcement people.
Well,
we need to discuss this in a civilized manner, and I will be happy to provide proof of everything that I've said here tonight.
And that's the one thing that from a law, people have a lot of, they may have an axe to grind or whatever it is, but in law enforcement, what you truly find, and I've always found, is that a lot of leadership in law enforcement would not sit down and have any kind of conversation like this, where your rank and file are out there in the street are always willing to listen to the different perspectives. And while it may not be popular, they're at least going to discuss it and talk about it. While you agree with everything I say, or I agree with everything you say, the point is we can have the conversation and others can hear it. And, we can, compare, we can talk about it. And in the long run, we're still Americans bound by the Constitution.
Like
as far as
we are Americans. We're not Democrats. We're not Republicans.
Right.
We're not libertarians. We are Americans.
That's right. We're not, and law enforcement officers are just as equally concerned about how they do their job and how they're perceived in doing their job than the average person sitting out there watching it from the Monday morning quarterback situation. Because 99.9% of law enforcement officers are good and they uphold the law and they do the right thing. You may have that little 1% in there that are in it for their own reasons. Law enforcement, we don't have the opportunity to wake up Monday morning and watch the highlight reels 2,500 times like it just happened, and make a decision once we see it. It's rapidly evolving when we're making decisions that are life and death situations. That means things are happening very quickly. And if you don't act, either your life is going to revolve before your eyes or you're going to die as you get. And you have to act fast. In doing that, you have to have a toolbox. You have to have the resources to process what your next move is. And if an interview or a conversation invokes that thought process and makes somebody think about it, and somewhere down the way, they look and go, you know what? I get it. I may not agree with it, but I get it. You've just built a bond with somebody that realizes you can have differences of opinion. And like I said earlier, that doesn't mean you're bad people.
Right.
That just means your opinions are different.
Yeah.
And again, we're Americans first and everything next. And, but the other thing is you can't be so far left that you think every cop needs to be assassinated. So the summer of love, you got people killing cops and think that's love for the cops.
That's not a civilized society.
Yeah, exactly. And I think until we have conversations like this,
do to your fellow man.
Right. And until conversations like this are being held by everybody, they won't change anything. And I think, I'm a Republican and proud Republican. I supported Trump and I'm going to support him again. I think he was wrong. But the reality is, I don't want to go out there and blow somebody's house up, or I don't want to go out there and fight somebody, and I don't want to burn towns down, and I don't want to see a civil war. But I'm here to tell you, my concern is that if they keep going in a direction, we all know that every state, you have to be blind not to realize it, every state has a very secret, quiet militia sitting in the wings. And every state has that secret, quiet militia not talking, and they're all sitting back there waiting just for some kind of call sign to bear arms. And they're waiting for that moment. And you know that's coming. But the question is who's going to put the bat signal out there? And I just don't think that's coming unless you see all of a sudden somebody end up going to prison for their political belief. Then I think it's going to be worse. You're going to have neighbor against neighbor, family against family, friend against friend. And it's going to be like an urban war. It's not going to be
the writing on the wall that I've seen, and where I'm at is like, man, wait a minute. Before we jump to the second, let's look at the first. What are we supposed to do first here? Petition for your grievances. I do not advocate for violence. So there's, even in our founders' paperwork, that we have petitioned, we have remonstrated. Yes, we've been met with repeated injuries. Well, that's the reason why we separated from England, and our founders created this brilliant form of government where it protects everybody, and everybody has a, depending on what position they're in, there's a process that is due to them to deprive them of whatever seat they're in or whatever rights that they've violated.
Right. And it's not being. And
so before we get to acts of violence under the Second Amendment, let's talk about the First Amendment and follow due process of law first.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point is you can't say, okay, this didn't work, now let's go fight. Which you have to expend every moment of every hour of every day to where you're not the assailant. The government has become the assailant.
Yes.
And then the Constitution deals with that.
The Bible tells us to turn the other cheek. Okay.
Yeah.
So that means we at least are supposed to turn the cheek and go, hey, right. You're standing in a grocery line and the man in front of you steps back on your foot, your toe. I don't know. Do you pull your sidearm off and shoot him in the head?
Look, let me give you an experience this morning. I'm on my way to work. I'm in the left lane, and I was driving with the speed of all the traffic, and I see this guy pull up behind me. I can't get out of the way because the car in front of me can't get out of the way. And the right side, there's a truck over there. I can't do anything about it. I'm right there. I'm stuck in the conundrum of I'm between all this. And finally, the car goes up slowly and comes up. I don't think nothing. I move over to the right lane because the guy's so hurried I am. And I'm going down. I'm riding down the highway. And this guy is driving a PT Cruiser. It looked like it. I mean, it could have been a little different. He has his moon roof down, his slide back roof, and he's got his hand up and his finger waving in the air at me. And I just looked at him and I said, dude, you're stupid. This is not a battle you want. Just go. And he's up in front of me. He pulls in front of me and starts doing the weird finger thing. And I didn't respond to him. I just kept going. I just waved at him as I was going by. He got behind me again. Well, anybody that knows me knows I'm going to avoid confrontation until I can't avoid confrontation. And if you come at me like that, you're driving a car, which is a deadly weapon at that time. You're driving a deadly weapon, and you're trying to goose me and try to stop in front of me. And the first thing I thought, well, I'm going to keep going. But for some reason, the Second Amendment just kept flying all over top of me thinking, this guy gets stupid,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going about that time, and I just looked at him. So I just picked up my phone and turned my video on and started videotaping. He slowed down, started his finger, got next to me and everything. And he looked at me, he has his little finger up, and he was doing like he was going to shoot somebody. Well, the idiot didn't understand that I had my 45 sitting right there next to me. So while he was shooting his finger at me like that, I was sitting there with my 45 thinking, the funny part was I'm thinking, if you only knew, you'd take your little ass right on down that road because I'm not getting hurt up here. I'm not going to threaten it. But if my life becomes a problem,
Yep.
and he gets back to, now let's take it further. Let's say that the government decided they wanted that gun and I didn't have it. You know, they'd be dead wrong, and I'd
Yep.
just be dead
Right.
if something happened. But again, I wasn't looking for that confrontation, but I'm always prepared for that confrontation.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me a person who's smart enough to understand that while things can get into it's how I act can also facilitate a problem. Then I
Yes.
need to make sure that I don't act to facilitate the problem.
Absolutely.
But I will defend, in the military,
Yep.
this we will defend. And I will defend my family and
We're
myself.
taught to try to de-escalate, right?
Right.
Any
Exactly.
kind of aggressive behavior, it's time to de-escalate before.
Yeah. And I thought about this guy. I said, what if this guy, he gets the wrong person and he jumps on the wrong person and something bad happens to him? What has he just done to his family? What has he done to people all around him?
Mm-hmm.
And they can't pray him into heaven.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks you could pray somebody into heaven. If you got a bad dude, is a bad dude not making good decisions, you could pray him into heaven all you want, but he ain't gonna be prayed into heaven.
That would be ex post facto, after the fact.
Yeah. So I look at it. So it is what it is. And but the reality is, if me being a Republican was as extreme as Biden said we all were, that situation would have ended probably 5 minutes earlier and not in a good way for somebody.
Right.
But when you're reserved and you're intelligent enough to understand the process and understand that just because the president thinks you got an R by your name, that you're a problem or you're an extreme or whatever he wants to call you, that doesn't mean you have to give him the evidence of that.
Yeah.
So I always encourage people.
Don't make it true.
Yeah, you just don't give them the right to say, yeah, see what I told you. So I always tell people, what you do has consequences. And those consequences are a lot further bearing on your family and society than you'll ever understand if you take an action that you don't need to take and didn't have to take.
Yep.
When you could prevent it. But anyway, that's my little philosophy at the end of the show. So anyway, again, I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been good. We're going to do this again, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And we're going to get out there definitely and get this broadcast rocking and rolling. And I think this is something that needs to be out there. And I'm going to put it out there just as hard as I can. And we're going to get it on the USGen network and get that up there and rocking and rolling. And I could probably get you on some other shows, and we'll talk about that too. And we'll definitely do this again. This has been good, and I think we've given the folks viewing, listening, watching a little bit of it. So in closing the show, folks, thank you for being here. And I always say, in anything you do, be safe, be real, but more importantly, be ready, because you never know when the wolf is knocking at your door.